today we are really lucky to be at the growing point in Dignan Street with the Dignan Street Community Garden with Ange, Rebecca and Ellen. So I'm Sarah Smuts-Kennedy. I am the vision holder of For the Love of Bees and the Regenerate Now program, and one of the co-creators of the Urban Farmers Alliance. We're really thrilled to be bringing this to you today. We are really committed to creating a free educational platform that enables anyone who wants to use their photosynthesis opportunity to make a difference in regards to climate change, but also develop local resilience in a neighbourhood economy kind of a way. So today we're really lucky to be seeing this, what has been a community garden and still will be a community garden, but is actually transitioning to urban farming practices as part of interning alongside the OMG project in Simon Street and being part of the Regenerate Now program. So thank you very much for joining us. Bailey.
Yeah, hello everyone. It's really exciting to join the team again today and to dive into another garden with you all. So thank you, and really interested in the whole, I see how active each of you are in the WhatsApp platform and really engaged in the learning. So I just commend you on being willing to share that journey as well. And yeah, I really hope that it's a benefit to you, because I definitely know it's helping others. So looking forward to the session today.
Hi everyone, my name is Daniel Sherman. I'm coming to you today from Marlborough. I'm really looking forward to seeing their Growing Point garden. It's a place I haven't visited before, so I only know it from its soil analysis that we went through today, and really looking forward to seeing the garden and how it's progressing. And so can you guys introduce yourself and take it from there?
Kia ora.
Kia ora. Kia ora.
Yeah, it's awesome to be the farmers in the field this week. We've been very excited about it, and it's a great opportunity to be able to post the videos on the Instagram through the week. And so yeah, we thought we'd do a brief tour, but probably focus on the new beds and the new system of planting, and so that you can kind of see the difference between how we have been gardening and now with the interning at OMG, how we're transitioning to get more productivity out of the site. And we're super interested in the feedback around the soil, and Anne just got a lot of questions about the soil and that. So I'm spade ready. Not tilling, but if you would like a spade dig just to observe live what's here, there's very little worms, but we're happy to do a spade test as we go.
That's the spirit. Thank you.
What was that?
I said that's the spirit. Thank you.
All right, well, shall we head off down? So behind us is, we're in the orchard area right now. So we've just got, we counted 58 trees in the orchard. So I was quite astounded by that. I didn't realise quite how many we had. And Ellen's done a big job pruning today. But we'll head off down to where the new beds are, so you can see what we've been up to down there.
Now, Rebecca, as you're taking us down there, can you please, for those of us who aren't familiar with your project, can you tell us how much land you have, how much square meterage you think you have in garden beds, and a little bit about how you acquired the land and its history?
Sure. So we've got 850 square meters of ground. We've been here since 2015, and it started off as a retired bowling green. So all this has been built up from a field of kikuyu with truckloads of wood mulch, cardboard, and then wood mulch, and then we've built beds on top of that. So you can see as we move through, some of the beds are raised, and we're now trialing with Levi's guidance, having them basically at ground level, so we're not, there's basically flat level between the paths and the beds themselves. So head on down. So these are 3 new beds we've just put in with the polycropping. This is the first time we've had full cloches, and on the advice we've not put, we would normally have put some sort of plant mulch on there, but we aren't wanting to add any additional organic matter, so we've used sacks to plant into, just to keep the weeds down and the moisture in. So we've done strips in our rows there, and we've redone our irrigation. So we've changed from beds that were 900 wide with about 500 mil path widths, and we've now got 1 wide beds and 300 mil paths, so that we're maximising the growing area. And this is new for us to do this high density planting in as a structured way as we're doing now. So in the past, if you spin the camera around, Ange, it's just, we've had sort of more organic shapes and a lot of interplanting, but not the sort of formal rows that we're doing now. So this is hopefully going to be increasing the productivity of the land. But I think another key factor that we saw when we were at OMG was the discipline around the harvesting. So here a lot of stuff grows, and then it's when we're not doing sort of regular harvesting yet, and so things kind of swamp other things, and it gets it all a little bit eclectic and just not as productive as it could be. So things get too tall and it shades out other things. So we've kind of been more mindful about the planning of what goes into each bed with the new ones. And potentially we could, I've sent through a garden plan, but we could potentially take those long beds right through the full width of this if we get rid of this bay of compost bins. So we could standardise the 7.5 long beds at 1.2 wide. So we could get another 6 beds in this area here, which at the moment isn't maximising production. And we just need to stop it before, because we've got some trees up this end, so we'd have to cut one of them a little short.
How long is the site?
I think it's
35 meters.
5 meters. Yeah.
That includes the 2 meters pavement.
Yeah. So we've got at the front, sort of 1/4 to 1/3 is the the orchard. That's we're looking more at a food forest kind of strategy for that. The other issue that's key here is water security, and so it's an attractive option to have a planting strategy that's very water resilient, and so obviously the beds will take a lot more irrigation than a food forest. So, and we're sort of planning into the future long term as well. So how can we get productive using the trees in the food forest and not just kind of blitzing the whole site with long beds that are, if drought becomes an issue, it's going to be really problematic. So kind of trying to strike that balance.
What is the water supply that you have at the moment?
We've got about just under 20,000 liters of tank storage. Some of those have to be siphoned off into tanks that are not connected to any guttering. We've got a pump to do that. We've got a 42 square meter roof that separates the bowling green from this garden. This was built once this became redundant and was a bit of an eyesore for the bowlers. So that's 42 square meters of roof on the whole length of the 35 meters. And then we've got a number of sheds and a seed house, which is probably another 25 square meters, 25 square meters of roof space. And they are either leading into the long gutter, or they're going directly into a 1,500 liter tank and a 1,000 liter tank.
That sounds excellent as far as water harvesting is. So is that because there isn't a connection to any sort of municipal supply?
Yeah. Theoretically there is, but the bowling ground manager isn't quite certain himself whether we still have some sort of a live irrigation as they used to use it for bowling grounds. So we're not to cut any pipes, but we can also not make use of them.
Okay, interesting. That's is that a legacy of the former relationship of how the site was activated?
It's basically just that nobody knows when this bowling ground was founded, which is about 80 years ago. Of course, the irrigation isn't age, but there's just not enough knowledge. Even the previous grounds manager, who has been incredibly supportive, doesn't have a clue and also didn't have the time to investigate it further. He came up with a few ideas what could be, but asked us not to intervene with any of the piping, because if there would be life, it would be really hard to undo the damage. But we're not sure, and we wouldn't have access to any switches anyway.
Okay,
so do you find in the areas where you're just creating these beds, or in the normal sort of garden beds, that in summer it needs a lot of water, or?
Yeah.
Okay. It'd probably be interesting now to just have potentially a dig around to see what's in and underneath that soil, because some of the pictures you sent through of the holes that you had dug looked like an awful lot of wood chip was still kicking around, and there wasn't a lot there to hold moisture. So that's, whether that's my imagination from those stills or whether that's the reality, will be interesting to see.
I think it's quite right, and I feel that the cardboard that we used might have contributed to the not integration of the wood mulch, but also that area hasn't seen any artificial water.
In the orchard.
Well, any apart from the rain.
So the spade dig that we did send photos through hasn't been kind of put into a bed. So we'd be interested to do a dig in a spot that hasn't been made for the new beds, but that was prepared as a bed. So that's different from how we were handling the orchard. So that's kind of closer to the soil available for where we would potentially do the long beds. Should we have a dig?
Yeah,
Yep.
I think that'll be interesting.
Right. Spade ready.
So just coming back to your water, just quickly, have you run that system dry this season? Is that something that happens frequently?
What was the question? The question was, have we run the watering system dry? Is that something that happens frequently?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. So 20,000 liters are nowhere near enough, especially they were possibly okay for what we did in the past, but they're certainly nowhere near enough for the bed that we have and gonna be putting in. There's quite a bit of fungal activity there.
The wood chipping.
We need to try and be quite still, and okay, we can see that.
So that's pretty good now, but it's pretty hard to actually envision. I mean, obviously it looks very dry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's obviously partly a lot to do with the fact that Auckland isn't receiving anywhere near its normal rainfall, as well as not obviously helping. So did you find a worm? Okay.
One. Yeah. One
Brave worm. Yeah, it'd be largely too dry by the looks of it to expect to find anything other than worms that have gone very deep and dormant, because they just don't like, you know, that sort of condition that's that dry.
Yeah.
But it just looks to me, when you look in every time I look in the hole, what I just see is like a massive wood chip.
Yeah.
No, they do fall in from.
That's the thing. Is that falling in from the top, or are we still looking at when we
falling
get down?
In from the top.
Can you try and grab a handful of soil from the bottom of the hole without the wood chip, just to see?
Loosen it a bit. It's too hard to.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, it's pretty much.
That's better.
Yeah. Okay, just need to hold the camera really still and try and get it to focus on that. It looks odd. Oh no, there we go. It looks less odd now. It had a really strange pattern across the screen. Is there any moisture in that? So if at the moment, if you're pushing that together, is there any sort of, or is it just falling apart and as crumbs?
It's a little sticky.
Oh yeah.
But I can't get.
Yeah.
Much.
So when you did the soil samples, how much of the top did you scrape away when you actually sort of took a sample?
And
I took it from the beds and followed the instructions, but I sort of tried to do it in a spot that, you know, kind of scrape away the
loose material on top?
Loose material, and then put the spade in. I measured the spade and took kind of the 150 centimeters, I think it is, isn't it?
150 mils.
Yes, that's right.
I'd be impressed if you dig a hole 1.5 meters deep.
Yeah. No, sorry. Yeah.
No, that's cool. Okay.
Oh, you just don't know me well enough, eh?
Yeah. It's very, very difficult to see. The soil does look somewhat lighter in colour than potentially down there than it should be. And I think it's all a legacy at the moment of what we're expecting to see is, one, very dry conditions, so won't expect a lot of worms, but two, also that we've got this huge carbon sort of semi-decomposed material on top that kind of isn't really, the system isn't really functioning to sort of percolate down into that for a range of reasons, obviously. But I don't think we'll find it. There's no, obvious signs at the moment of a great deal of fungal activity or life in there either.
That coating on the.
Yeah, the wood chip's got this white fungi on it.
Is it fungi or is it more likely to be Actiniomycetes bacteria? Because in that sort of really dry state, that also tends to favour Actiniomycetes bacteria. And like if you get lots of white powdery, it's really hard to see through what we're looking there. Given how dry it is, I'd suspect that that's more likely to be bacteria. Can you see any hyphae? Because it just looks like a white powdery substance.
Is that hyphae there?
No.
If you see any hyphae and it's really fine, more like candy floss, than it is actually looking like a healthy root. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure with all that wood material run, you'd expect to find some fungal life, but I think it's probably it's going to be challenging for it for a whole range of reasons. But it is dry. I mean, I think that's probably the biggest
So I'm immediately wondering what's the first step here, Daniel, as far as a move towards
Getting it,
inoculating or
yeah.
getting the fungal community alive.
Well, I mean, the fungi will be present and alive, but the environment and the conditions aren't at the moment giving it a great deal to work with to thrive. So, you know, obviously, increasing moisture levels. Yeah, I mean, there's a reasonable bit of moisture down there, so the activity is probably. There's probably more activity as you deeper that you go down. The problem is that we actually need lots of fungal activity happening in the top to break down all that woody mass that's there. And what I was thinking is that, and we can have a look later on, probably in a little while, actually, if we want to, we can share the soil analysis so we can actually discuss a little bit. But essentially what we're looking at is the pH is too high because of the excess magnesium, particularly a massive excess of potassium, and that has come from essentially just far too much of the woody mulch material, and it's sort of overwhelmed the whole site. So you haven't really got this exchange pool. Any soluble nutrients just being soaked up by all the carbon that is there. So there's not a lot of freely available. And what you're seeing is, having driven the pH high, so you're almost at 6.9, I think it came back at, is that favors bacterial activity over fungal activity. And that means that the conversion of the nitrogen from ammonium nitrogen to nitrate nitrogen is proliferates, because the nitrifying bacteria really function extremely well. And when you get towards alkaline conditions, the fungi moderate that by creating more acidic conditions, and they slow down the conversion of ammonium nitrate to nitrate nitrogen. And when you've got this massive excess like we have at the moment, which is 76 parts per million of nitrate nitrogen and 2 ppm of ammonium nitrogen, so you have a massive excess of nitrates, is that it massively promotes weed growth. And it's a way of, obviously it's trying to fix itself. It's a natural process it's going through, but it makes actually producing productive crops and amongst massive weed pressure very difficult at times. So we've sort of created that perfect storm, really, where we've, obviously you can see what looks like a lot of young weed growth, germinating all over the place. Obviously there's lots of plants in there as well, but as a general rule, what we term as weeds will probably flourish and cause a bit of consternation, particularly if you're trying to grow things in more formal beds. In less structured beds, it's probably less of an issue, but you can very quickly have the system overwhelmed with sort of weedy species. And that's basically a consequence of that massive nitrate load that we're seeing.
Should we do it in the new bed?
So what we want to do is that, the suggestion, I think someone said, well, I think Rebecca had written, should we put some gypsum in there to try and lower the potassium level down? I actually think at the moment in this particular situation, that isn't going to work. One is gypsum isn't harmless to fungi. It is still it's still a salt. It's still a salt as far as the fungi are concerned. And where is the potassium going to go? You need water, you need moisture, you need rain for that to work anyway. So you could throw a lot of gypsum on. Actually, at the moment, it would create a complete negative in the fact that it would be harmful to the biology, and it wouldn't go anywhere and do anything because we've got no rain and water to actually make that work. The other thing is, what we've basically got to do is stop introducing wood mulch in particular into the system, and because we need things to start to have room to move, and just keep planting mass plantings. But I was thinking the use of, in this particular case, of lactobacillus, and I use the example of BAM, but it's lactobacillus, and it's quite acidifying. it's really good at also breaking down things like BAM and EM and those sorts of things are really good at also breaking down woody material. So they help the fungi when the fungi aren't particularly active, but they also lower the pH. So they create an environment that the fungi will like more. And so introducing the likes of lots of either BAM or EM, but particularly to lower the pH using microbiology, and then lots of fungal inoculation on anything that you plant in the garden. But that process of lowering the pH will actually start to, and putting fungi in, will start to balance your nitrogen model. It'll start keeping more of the nitrate, nitrogen, and ammonium form. But you know, to do that you also need hydrogen, and at the moment there's no room for it because we've got this overload of potassium. So it's going to be a process that takes time. As far as a food source goes, the thing that screams out to me at the moment, and I'm not a massive fan of fish, but in this particular case, fish offers a lot. A good fish hydrolysate, because you're going to, fungi love it. It brings in a little bit more of the ammonium nitrogen in a natural complex form to kind of help feed and help the breakdown of all of that woody material and try and getting some balance to it. But essentially, yeah, basically the answer is there's no fertilizer that will help here. It'll only make the situation worse. But microbial feeds like the fish hydrolysate would be a good start. Using lactobacillus-based microbials, as I said, like EM or BAM, these sorts of things. You know, bokashi type mixes, anything like that, and using that on a regular basis to be applied to the soil and the plants, and fungal inoculums, I think is really the only, you know, is the way to move forward with what I'm seeing at the moment. That, and it would be helpful if it would rain a bit more.
Yeah.
Can I have two questions about that. The first question be, would it make sense to start inoculating and using those materials or those liquids now when we are not quite sure when we will get rain? So will they be useful and doing their thing if there's no rain, because we don't have any excess water to then just irrigate very much? We really need to use that water sparingly to getting it towards every single plant that we've just planted. And the second question is, how would we bring that out? Would we spray it, or could we? We've got a pump. Could we like irrigate it with a more like shower head nozzle, or what would be the way to?
So to answer the first question, it's an interesting one that I've often been asked by farmers coming out of dry conditions in summer, and I said, look, if you wait till it rains, often it rains and then it doesn't stop, and then you have the problem that you know, when you put on the microbial foods and inoculums, it doesn't disappear. It doesn't just evaporate out of, it's there waiting for the soil. So the minute any rain comes, it's got something to work with. So, you know, so my usual suggestion is, well, other thing is, in every other year that I've lived in Auckland, rain has been something that, yes, at times it gets dry, but it does come, and quite often when it comes back with a vengeance, and then you're sick of it because it won't stop raining. So getting ahead of it in the aspect that you're going to be going into a season with more rain, I wouldn't hesitate putting anything in if you've got the time and capacity to do it. The second one is, you sure can put it through the irrigation. Putting it together and putting it on the plants that you're just planting, obviously with whatever water that you're putting on, is immediately going to be a benefit to those plants. Your ability to put, you know, so definitely on the plants that you're planting, and if you've got any other capacity to put it on anywhere else, the fact that it doesn't rain doesn't mean it's not going to be there. I would, in this case, we're talking about soil amendments rather than a foliar spray. There are things that we can do. I can't remember, are you operating a are you operating under certified organics or OFNZ or is there any restriction on what you can put as inputs?
No,
Okay.
I mean, our preference to be organic, but we know your guidance is that it's not always.
No, the only reason I say that is not that I'm putting in anything that isn't technically organic. It's just certified that I'm thinking of, because you can use some foliar sprays because your soil has got a way to go to provide ideal nutrition availability for the plants. Using some foliar sprays like Levi is doing with, say, the products that we designed for that, which is the 4-step gardening system, which uses step 3 and 4 as a foliar, would help the plants deal with, there's ingredients in there to also help them deal with water stress as well. So things like kelp, there are ingredients within that, and there's a range of other things that work like electrolytes, and you put them on as a foliar. You use very small amounts of it, but the plants do respond to that, helps get better root activity, and that feeds the biology. Even when there is a restricted amount of moisture, it still helps the plant. If nothing else, it'll grow roots. But yeah, as far as the general inputs go here, we're talking about soil amendments in the case of what you're trying to put them on with, for argument, Helen, I would say, is like either through irrigation or through with like a heavy rose. So what you're targeting is actually the soil in the case of those inoculants. It's really about getting the volume into the soil, not a foliar spray is a little different in terms of what we're talking about.
Is that step 3 and step 4?
Yeah, so that's essentially what we're using from a foliar. So that would go on as a fine spray, so as a very, very fine spray. But when we're talking about putting in things like fish and the lactobacillus bacteria to raise the pH, that's all we really need to get that into the soil.
Things like the bokashi juice, is that useful as well?
In this particular case, especially because we're trying to get a little bit of a pH drop.
Yeah.
So the acidity of bokashi and those because that's basically lactobacillus, that is going to help. Because if we can get that pH down from what's almost 7 as an ideal for the nitrifying bacteria down to something like a pH around 6.3, that the fungi are going to respond much better. It'll slow down your nitrogen issue, which will start to reduce your weed pressure.
And how do we dilute that out from the stuff you get in the bottom of your bokashi bin?
I would usually, as a general rule, what we're looking to is probably something like 10 to 1 between water and that. We don't want, particularly if you've got plants around, we've got to be a little bit careful with the pHs. Some of that bokashi mix and that sort of stuff, the pH can be below 3. And if you start throwing that out on foliar or leaves on plants, sometimes you can burn them with that. So 10 to 1 is pretty safe, because what we basically want, it's an inoculum really. And if we get that lactobacillus going, we're doing its wonderful work in the soil, then that'll start lowering that pH, and it'll help the fungi.
What about worm juice? Is that going to be the opposite?
No, worm juice is still essentially largely a microbial inoculum. And it's certainly not like we've got a massive proliferation of worms at the moment. So any of the microbes that are coming out of that, they are also pretty much anaerobic in their use. And I'm not concerned about it being an alkaline or an acid, but the fact is the organisms will create an alkaline or an acid response. And what we're wanting to is increase those type of organisms. So worm juice in this case is going to be useful. It'll have a bit of liquid humic. I haven't suggested humic acid liquid in this particular case, just because the sheer volume of carbon that's there. We've really got to solubilize. If we start adding more carbon with humic acid, we're probably struggling at this point to get anywhere. We really need to get that carbon broken down, or not broken down, but solubilized, basically.
That's good to know, because we were just figuring out how we would harvest our humic acid from your masterclass this week.
Yeah. I mean,
so amazing.
Yeah, that was my next question.
Yeah, everywhere, every place you go, you know, there's always some variation, and there'll be places on your block that will really thrive with humic acid, and there'll be other places that you've just got so much woody material. You know, the fungi have got all the carbon in the world they need. What they need is, you know, well, they actually need to be present. So the other thing I said, it's really, really important in this case is to get everybody's head around, and in a community garden scene, you know, we've just dug some holes, right? But other than that, put the spade away, lock it away, leave it somewhere that people aren't tempted to turn it into a massive double digging exercise, because I just can't see that doing anything at the moment other than harm. You know, at the best of times, it's not great. In this situation, I think it could make it a lot worse, a lot worse.
So I noticed that, Rebecca, you mentioned earlier, and it was missed, about doing a dig in your current garden beds. Was that something you suggested, and is that something that you would like to do?
Well, just because, yeah, the soil may well be different there because of the way that we prepared those beds from where we've done the other two holes. So I'm just curious.
Yeah, and you're irrigating there as well, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have a
dig. Yeah, let's go and have a look.
Yeah, let's have a look at that.
And Alan, it would be great for you to be really to share with us what you did with the preparation of this garden bed that potentially is different to what you've done before in terms of, yeah, I think that would be great for people who are going to watch this to know how you've established this bed.
Okay, so they have been in this configuration since last, when did we do they were ready for summer last year. We've just extended the widths, but we took off the mulch that was there and inoculated the soil with a combination of BAM, protozoa tea, a worm tea, and step 2. So the soil itself was inoculated, and then everything that we planted in was pre-soaked with the same sort of brew.
It's
so this hasn't had the same amount of wood mulch. It's kind of had more.
Well, it
More
kind of had, because the old bed configuration was a keyhole. So that used to be here until last year, was sort of a keyhole with pathways through quite more free flow forms. And we had also, this is the part where we have always done annuals, and we have initially brought the soil from half of the homestead garden and deposited here on top of the wood chips that we had put down 5 years ago. And it was actually, you might not like to hear that, but in order to reconfigure this area, we had a woman come and basically dig it all up with a hoe, because we just didn't have any other idea to turn what was path in these wild beds into a more formal growing structure after we have been to OMG last year. But
a lot more life and very different color if you compared it on. And so what you've got to get that color difference is basically the humus, the organic matter is, you've got soluble organic matter in there, you've got humus, you've got sort of, there's life. I mean, it's a vastly different picture from the other hole, massive difference.
And this has been the most irrigated spot too. So.
Yeah, I mean, you know, water is life to a degree, to a very large degree, but it's just interesting to see that, you know, there is certainly that's a large, you know, it's a step, it's all moving in the right direction. I would say probably, yep.
Sorry, these are the sites where I took the soil samples from.
Okay.
And we had, when we first, after we did the turnover, we did pilot, because we had so much compost, because we're a composting hub site, we put barrows and barrows of it on, thinking that's the right thing to do.
Which is where we ended up with a 25% organic matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So. Yeah,
so I claim the moron badge. That was, you know, my
that was
my zealous composting.
We were all thrilled about having finally lots of compost. But what I'd be really curious is, can you know, doing visual soil tests, can you actually see too much compost in soil, or is that something?
It's a good question, actually. I mean, we're not. I guess we need to be clear here. We're talking about too much organic matter, not necessarily that you're looking at compost. And there is obviously going to be, I mean, we are looking at a moving system. So the most important thing that you get out of the VSA, the really critical thing that's telling us how much activity, is worm numbers. Now that's spades, but ideally needed to actually find about 30 worms. And I think if we really pulled it out and sifted it out, I'd be surprised if we probably get to 10.
No, I think there were 10 already, and we were in the spade down. So
yeah, so you know, so it's a case of, when you're monitoring it now, it's a case of doing that on occasionally. Particularly while there's moisture in a constant system. I mean, the only thing I look at the moment is, so what is that? Is that sacking that's covering it, or carbon?
Yeah.
And how long, I mean, when's that likely to have plants put in it?
This week.
this week, next week, Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Yeah,
We've down this
something.
so yeah.
It's just something light to stress. Yeah, I mean,
There's plants in that bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think once you start getting cropping happening in there, and you've got that polycrop of different species growing in there, and it's just a matter of supporting those plants. As I said, the best thing you can do with those plants now, essentially, is you know, follow Levi's example and putting some foliar sprays. When the plants are really young, you need a tiny amount. I mean, you know, that area might only use 50 or 100 mils of a product within a litre, and you know, as a 10-to-1 mix, 100 mils, and you'll probably spray most of the growing beds you've got there in the morning with a light mist once a week. Will go a huge way to actually getting those plants. As soon as they're active and they're starting to feed the soil system, and you're keeping it moist, and we're not aggravating it as we go along, you'll find more and more and more worms proliferating it. And the measurement is, you know, we start getting 30 is kind of, it used to be 27 was kind of this magic number, but these days a lot of people are talking north of 30 and 40 and 45. So you're talking about massive activity. And that usually, because they're feeding on fungi and protozoa, there'll be protozoa present. It's the worms, you know, like I said the other day, we were talking about the poop loop nutrient cycling system we have to get functioning, and we can overcome a lot of the limitations that we have around all the excesses in the soil.
So how quickly, because I've been in a similar situation. I've been, you know, a great permaculture follower. I've made amazing compost for years and built my garden beds on top of compacted clay with compost. And after a while saw a massive slowing down of the growth rate. And since I've started, you know, really feeding the plants, using plants to remediate it, I found a massive difference in the soil structure within, you know, 3 months. And is, you know, is that the sort of thing you're talking about, Daniel?
Yeah, it's basically reactivating the carbon cycle. You know, it wasn't supplying, it stopped functioning to a degree. It kind of stalled. It's got so much carbon. You're running out of room to stick anything in it. You know, and as the plant comes in, it sort of reactivates it, and you turn it on. And the thing is, if you foliar spray it, you keep the plant actually able to increase its productivity. And then it increases the amount of exudates it can put into the soil, and it kind of fires that whole system back up again. And you actually start getting those nutrients moving. You start harvesting the plants, and you're getting those sort of excess nutrients moving as well. But yeah, it's amazing what it will do. The reason that the foliar spray will work is because the soil is unable to supply the plant root with soluble nutrients. They're simply locked up with all that excess carbon. Even though you've got all this you've got all this massive amount of nutrition. One of the figures I look at to give an idea as to how much soluble nutrition, so what is actually in, because when we talked about the soil structure, we talked about the parent material, the exchange pool, and the soluble pool in the masterclass. And what you end up with is there's just not enough nutrition getting into that soluble pool. It's all sort of staying in the exchange pool. And when you do, one of the tests we do is an electrical conductivity test, or EC test. CF, same sort of thing, conductivity factor. And when you look at your result, it's amazing that you've got like masses of nitrates. You've got you should have a really high EC, but I think when I looked at it this morning, it was one of the lowest EC figures. I can remember putting in more zeros and behind the decimal point. Usually it's 0.1, 0.2, but we've got like 0.0001. There's literally no soluble nutrition. There's no soluble salts in there. It was surprising. It's something that'd be worth. You can measure that yourselves using an EC or a CF pen, and doing an analysis by taking soil samples to check that. But that was one of the things really surprising, and I think that shows you just how locked that nutrition is with all that organic matter. It just can't move. There's no nutrient cycle actually happening.
So this is we've got 10 minutes left, and I'm thinking this is a really amazing learning experience for all of us, is that you can do what you think is the best practice and be incredibly considerate with, you know, and what you're doing, and actually not understand the basics functioning and get way off track. So I'm really thank you guys for creating a really amazing learning opportunity for all of us, because I know we're going to come back in 3 or 4 months' time, and your farm is going to be in a completely different state. You're really committed. You're very smart. So this is an incredible learning opportunity. So, and you are not the only people who've ended up in this situation. There are plenty of people who have arrived in this place at the moment that we're looking to help transition really quickly. And just to let people know who are watching, what Daniel was talking about are things that are in the Masterclass 1 and the Masterclass 2, which are available for you to watch online. So let's go back to the soil tests and really focus on that with the girls, with these women now in the last 10 minutes that we have.
Do you want me to share the report on the feed?
Yep.
I have.
That way, anybody else watching knows what we're talking about. So we'll give that a.
Bailey, you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. I am wondering, thinking, all right, coming into winter, higher chance of rain. Good way to one way to think of water harvesting is also in biomass. I'm wondering what the planting strategies might be if we can think through some of those in the context of these soil tests, as well as that goal of seeing how it can set yourselves up with the planting strategies as well. Do yourself as many favors as possible.
Yeah, good idea.
So if you're talking planting strategy and biomass, you're talking about something, because on the other hand, apparently we don't need that much more biomass.
Yeah.
So are you talking water retention through, for example, we've got 3 massive Abyssinian bananas that were originally planted for exactly that reason. Is that what you mean? Or
well,
because
I think
talking about winter, every winter of the last 5 years, we're gonna have a boggy mess, and we shared some photos with you from when we dug out the foundation for our very first tank, which was about 30 centimeters deep, and we then put sand there and compacted it to have a good foundation. I mean, that was a swimming pool after, you know, a typical Auckland rain. That photo was taken, I think, in September.
Yep. Could you clarify what you meant, Bailey, about biomass and planting strategies?
So which, I think probably to be more specific, which crops could you look at which are going to take up some of that excess phosphorus I can see in there? Daniel, this would be where you take on, but using typical edible production lines, so product species, say carrots, or I'm thinking maybe avoid brassicas because of they're not going to be supporting mycorrhizal fungi. Yeah, Daniel.
Okay, I'll kick in here. Yeah, it's really important to understand that when we talk about fungi in the soil, we're not just talking about you know, mycorrhizal fungi. So it's all the fungal activity that's happening, and the phosphorus will impact mycorrhizal fungi, which, you know, extremely important. But when you've got all the saprophytic fungi at the moment, is what you probably need to actually break down that woody material. And the thing is, there's lots of fungi that still interact with things like brassicas. So one of the advantages of obviously over winter, at this time of the going into winter, is the fact that, you know, brassicas become, you know, front and center of the productive veggie garden. But if you interplant those with other species that will support it, you'll end up supporting a wider range of microbial species. So that's the idea of having things like you know, Swiss chard and celery and other things that will actually produce over winter. Even peas, for that matter, would be, well, they might not like the really high nitrates here, being a legume, but, you know, those sorts of things being interplanted, I think, is really important from a. And the great thing about brassicas, of course, is that you know, they're quite aggressive also in rooting, and they'll still manage to overcome quite often soils that are not absolutely ideal. I think we'll probably see brassicas grow reasonably well in this soil. If you're growing them in winter away from, hopefully, the white butterfly, cabbage butterflies, you know, depending on how cold we get. I can't remember off the top of my head. I know down here they're all gone, long gone, you know, but up in Auckland, I'm sure you still see them flying around for a little while yet.
Very few.
Yeah, but, you know, that is about getting soil cover, so maximising the amount of planting, the density of planting, probably planting much more densely. So typically where someone might plant a cabbage 40-50 centimeters apart, for argument's sake, I tend to bring them down to like 20-30 centimeters. And
Which we've done. Yes,
yeah,
we've done that.
Yeah,
overplant. Lettuce.
Yeah, it's like overplanting almost to a large degree, because that's, we're trying to get that massive photosynthetic activity happening as quickly as possible. But yeah, you certainly don't, you know, I like you think from a biomass. I mean, the thing that holds water in the soil is actually the humus. It's the soluble, interesting enough, what we call the soluble organic matter that is actually the component in the whole organic matter as a whole, that actually holds the moisture. And bacteria are particularly good at holding onto moisture as well. You know, obviously, it's just a matter of working through this process. But I wanted to show the soil analysis as an example, because you can see, even though I added an extra couple of zeros in our conductivity example up here, is we're looking for 0.1 and 0.2, you know, which is tiny figures, because typically in conventional agricultural systems, quite often these things go as high as 0.5, even as high as 1, so 10 times higher often, you know, and higher than they should be. And what we've got here is that it should read 0.0001. So there is no soluble, you know, the nutrition is very, very insoluble. And that has nothing to do with the fact at the moment that there is no moisture, because that's not part of the analysis there. What they're measuring is but you can measure that. As you can see, that what you're using here is if you mix 1 part of soil with 5 parts of water, and you've got a CF meter or an EC meter, you can do this test yourself. Same with pH, 1 to 5, just with water. You won't get an absolute perfect figure, but you'll get a figure close enough to give you an idea of whether you're becoming more acidic or more alkaline. So you'll be able to see a trend, and it's the same with the EC. You'll be able to see if we're actually improving conductivity, but that in itself is all just pure chemistry. When we're looking at, it's these sorts of figures here, like the 76 parts per million, you can see a hugely, massively excess in nitrate, nitrogen. We've got no ammonium nitrogen to speak of.
Daniel, can you just let us know what those columns relate to? Because at the moment, for those of us who haven't seen this before, is one of them, where's the ideal, so that we know where we're at? Okay,
I'll slide it down a little bit. So you should be able to see up here ideal level.
Yes.
And your level.
Yeah.
Right? So what we're talking about, so there, the soil analysis came back with 76 parts per million of nitrate, nitrogen. So running through this. The ideal we're looking for is somewhere between 10 and 20.
Yeah.
So when the things go bright blue or light blue, whatever you want to call it, that's indicating an excess. And so, I mean, this is the sort of report that we say is dominated by its excesses. We've got excess organic matter, excess nitrates, excess phosphorus. It's all just a combination of what's come in there over a period of time. I mean, again, it shows you the value of compost. When people think compost is just a bunch of organic matter and it sort of looks nice and feels good, and you throw it, it actually comes with a huge amount of nutrition. It's hugely valuable. When you put that compost through a worm, you magnify. I mean, so that's what we want the worms to do. The worms are eating that, and they are kind of the secret to actually magnifying. It's not that they increase the nutrition. What they do is they increase the amount of nutrition that's in the soluble pool, right, that the plant can access.
And when Daniel says the soluble pool, what he's talking about is the pool that the plant can access. Yeah, thank you, Daniel.
Good clarification. So yeah, this is just all about highlighting, that we don't need, we just don't, at this stage we need less, not more. So in this case, more is less, or less is more, sorry. One other thing I did look at is initially you did analysis on that block of that piece of land for organic levels, as in looking for heavy metal contamination. And they called zinc, for argument's sake, I remember it was 300 parts per million zinc as a total extracted. This is a different test. But what we had is if you got more than 300 parts per million in a total extraction test, that would be considered an excess of zinc. And you didn't have an excess of copper or zinc. Both those were under the levels that were accepted by, for argument's sake, biogrowth standards. The copper's only 60 ppm, zinc's 300. But what we're testing here is the relevance to plant availability. And the interesting thing is we've got not an excess of zinc from an organic standard point of view, but from a plant available point of view, we've actually got a really massive excess of zinc. And this has an impact on things like phosphorus. So that excess zinc at the moment is possibly, should be a 10-to-1 ratio with our phosphorus. Well, it's nothing like that. But that gives you some idea of when we only want 70 parts per million as a maximum phosphorus, really zinc, what we're looking for is only about 7 parts per million. And what we've actually got is 65. So another reason to back off, because potentially that's all arrived from compost. So whatever compost source was also coming with a huge amount of zinc. But yeah, I think there was also a question around needing, do we have more lime? We don't, or more calcium. You don't actually need, by any stretch of the imagination, more calcium. You are within, well and truly within the ideal level of calcium. It's just the excesses in magnesium, a couple of % more than you need. That causes more alkalinity. We've got the max potassium actually could potentially be 7% in a crop like tomatoes or potatoes. but you know, on the whole, we've still got 5, 6, 7%. Basically, got double the amount of potassium we really want in that soil. So, was there any other questions on that you guys wanted to ask before we run out of time?
I would like to ask, just get back to what you said. We can check the conductivity ourselves. Did you mean just like a multimeter?
Yeah, so you can get a meter. Well, you can get a meter that just tests for conductivity, or you can get one that tests for. Yeah, I think Blue Labs do a multimeter as well. But they have a thing called a conductivity stick. You can go. The pH meter usually get from who have I recommended?
Baker.
Yeah, so they probably do a really simple conductivity meter as well. And that's the same sort of thing, and it's just a matter of mixing water and soil together. And ideally, you would use, you know, technically you're supposed to use. Andrew will be able to tell me what it is. Again, I'm thinking of the water is a water with a 0 EC, a pure, like a rainwater. But if you measure the water to start with and it has no EC, no conductivity factor, like take rainwater, usually you wouldn't find an EC in it, and you mix the soil in it and you get an EC lift, all of that EC is coming from the soil. But at the moment you might struggle in some cases to put soil in and get any response because of the level that you're looking at. If you have a meter that measures CF, it's actually measuring the same thing, but the figure that it shows you is 10 times, is a factor of 10. So we were talking about, you know, ECs of 0.1, we're talking about CFs of 10, just for anybody that happens to pick up a CF meter. It's measuring exactly the same thing, it's just using a different measurement unit of measure.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to bring this to wrapping up, and great, it would be what I would think is really useful is for us to just quickly, and we have gone over time, just to give us an idea, crew from Growing Point, what it is that you are going to be focusing on now for the next 3 months.
Well, playing around with, you know, measuring what Daniel just suggested, maybe taking spot measures in our direct and intentional growing fields. And I'd say we'll check our finances and see what fish hydrosol we.
Yeah, definitely.
And the step 3 and 4 for the plants and the EM. Maybe we'll go a bit to bokashing instead of composting for now.
We
Yeah.
do have we're particularly keen because we've got a massive aloe plant row just around the corner. That if that does help, we've asked whether it has to be specifically aloe vera or whether a variety would still help. We were actually just going to try it because it's kind of freely available on site. Whether kind of chucking that around the orchard and everywhere, I mean, it's the sort of thing that we could be very liberal with as it's free, and just to see whether we can then see evidence of mycorrhizal fungi in results of applying that. But also that definitely, you know, getting that photosynthesis happening, getting the real density of the planting, being more mindful about that combination we had interplanted with our brassicas after you mentioned that on the masterclass, Daniel. So
increasing would protozoa tea still, you know, be making those things, making sure you kept all the organic matter out.
The protozoa tea is there simply basically to release the nutrition from the nitrogen or from the bacteria in the soil. So it's a vital part of it. Then it's also worm food. So one of the quickest ways to increase worm numbers is to lift protozoa numbers. You've certainly, I think, potentially got the bacteria there to support it. So that's just providing more food for worms, which they will increase the level of soluble nutrition. So it's certainly a tool that you can use. A quick answer on the aloe vera or aloe plant. I don't know whether other aloes would create the same response. I would be a little cautious. I'd try it, what I would tend to do is use it at 2 or 3 times the rate that we've sort of talked about, so a much more concentrated rate, put it in a small area and actually watch to see what the result is, if you can see any around some plants, whether you're actually seeing a benefit from it. Basically, observational science will tell you whether that's right or wrong.
What sort of time frame would you expect to see some results?
If it's a solubilized food source going into the ground, into, you know, I would expect to basically be able to see some sort of growth response from the plant within weeks, not months. And potentially, if it really works well and you've got lots of fungi present and you've got the right conditions, you'll see fungal proliferation relatively quickly. So it's just a matter of observing the results. But yeah, because I can't tell you the actual answer as in regards to different aloe species. I suspect you're right. It probably will work.
So again,
from a tree growing point of view, I have no complaints whatsoever about the growth that they've put on in the last 2.5 years.
Great. We have come to the end of our time. I would really like to give Bailey a chance to say something, but personally, I'm really excited about the transition. I think you're really demonstrating, I think, in an incredible way, how sites that have been producing plants are starting to become sites that are producing food, but also really repairing soil systems. And you're doing that with intention, and you're doing that with knowledge. So I'm really looking forward to coming back in the next 3 to 4 months to see, you know, really what that soil system, the crumbly structure that's, you know, looking the way it is now, how it is in a few months' time. To you, Bailey, and then I would just complete by saying, encouraging people who are watching to go back to our YouTube channel and to have a look at the other farmers in the field. Every farm is offering a different type of learning, and then to join us in the masterclass series. If you're very serious on wanting to join this community, you can reach out to us and get onto the WhatsApp channel if you are becoming a farmer or a community composter. And please follow the Regenerate Now Instagram, where you can see our early adopter farmers sharing their learnings in their Instagram takeovers for a week. Bailey.
Yeah, I think really honing in on those key points of finding those appropriate food sources and starting to get into the rhythm of bringing them into the routines, the weekly and daily routines, then you've got a really fantastic platform there. And keep feeling your way into that, asking great questions, and you're bringing a whole, like I said at the start, you bring a whole other crew, whole other community with you as you learn as well. So once again, thank you for that, and looking forward to seeing the progress that you make. Daniel, do you want to sign off as well? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for showing us around. You know, it was really interesting to see it. I wish I'd had an opportunity to actually see it, you know, firsthand. Maybe that'll come in the next few months, but keep up the good work, guys. You're you know, you're making huge strides there. So thanks for giving us your time.
We'll see everyone here at 4 o'clock next Friday.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you.
It's invaluable to us. We really, really appreciate it.